What if the Chris Watts case isn't quite as simple as we were told? I know that's a strong opening, but stay with me, because as we move into 2026, some details surrounding this case are raising serious questions. Quiet questions, uncomfortable questions, and questions certain people would rather you stop asking. Before we go any further, I want you to think about three things. First, why is money consistently being sent into a maximum security prison cell? Regular deposits, large amounts, thousands of dollars, to a man serving multiple life sentences with no possibility of release. Second, what happened to the surveillance footage in 2018? This was a quiet American neighborhood filled with cameras, doorbell systems, home security setups. Yet a surprising amount of that footage was never recovered or simply vanished. And third, who benefits from this case staying closed? Because when you follow the money, when you examine who's being protected, the answers start to feel unsettling. Let me be clear about one thing right now. This is not an attempt to claim Chris Watts is innocent. He confessed. He is incarcerated. That part is not in dispute. But what is in question is whether we were ever told the full story. There are gaps, missed opportunities, evidence that was never pursued, witnesses who were never pushed hard enough, and a pattern of protection that doesn't align with how cases like this usually unfold. By the end of this video, you'll understand why certain doors were closed so quickly, and why revisiting them makes some people nervous. Before we continue, let's pray. We pray for Shannon, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico. May their souls rest in peace, and may comfort and strength be with their loved ones. Type Amen in the comment section. Tell me your honest opinion on Chris Watts in comment section. I don't cover rumors. I don't chase trends. Every case on this channel is researched, verified, and questioned from every angle. If that's a kind of true crime you respect, subscribe and turn on notifications. So let's start where everyone thinks the story begins. August 2018, Frederick, Colorado. A pregnant woman and her two young daughters disappear without a trace. The nation watches in real time. A husband appears on camera, pleading for their safe return. His expressions, his words, his body language, analyzed endlessly across television screens and social media feeds. And the truth surfaces. Chris Watts confesses. He admits to killing his wife, Shannon, and their daughters, Bella and Celeste. The details are devastating, almost too much to absorb. What happens next is unusually fast. No trial, no courtroom battle, no public examination of evidence. Within weeks, Watts pleads guilty and is sentenced to multiple life terms without parole. The official explanation is straightforward. An affair, a desire to start over. A man who chose the unthinkable. Case closed. And that's the version most people still believe. But here's what didn't get much attention back then. The investigation concluded with remarkable speed, far faster than other cases of similar magnitude. Leads that could have been explored weren't. Digital evidence that should have been locked down wasn't preserved. Certain witnesses were spoken to, but not deeply questioned. And then something even stranger began to happen. Chris Watts didn't just disappear into the prison system. He was shielded. In 2019, Watts was involved in an altercation with another inmate. That alone isn't shocking. Crimes involving children often carry consequences behind bars. But what followed was anything but ordinary. Within hours, Watts was placed into protective custody. Not weeks, not days, hours. Soon after, he was transferred out of Colorado entirely, sent across state lines to Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, a maximum security facility. Now transfers happen, but interstate transfers for inmates like Watts? That's rare, very rare. Even more unusual is what other inmates have reported since. Prisoners claim that attempting to speak to Watts, or even asking about him, results in immediate consequences. Sudden unit changes, facility transfers, silence enforced. That's not standard procedure. That's containment. So the question becomes, what is being protected here? Is it Chris Watts himself? Or is it what he knows? And this is where the money enters the picture. Because inside prison, commissary accounts aren't supposed to tell stories. But sometimes they do, on the surface. None of this sounds unusual. Inmates receive money all the time. Family members send small amounts so they can buy basic necessities, snacks, hygiene items, stamps, maybe an occasional comfort food. Most prisoners have very little, $50, $100 if they're lucky. Some have nothing at all. But Chris Watts' financial records tell a very different story. According to public records reviewed by investigative journalists, his commissary account has been receiving consistent, large deposits, not occasional help, not small gifts, thousands of dollars. And this didn't happen once or twice. These deposits reportedly began around 2020 and continued year after year, well into 2025. So where is this money coming from? The obvious explanations don't hold up. There are no book deals, no paid interviews, no media appearances. Watts has remained publicly silent since his sentencing. His family doesn't have the financial means to support deposits of this size on a regular basis. And there's no known legitimate source that explains the pattern. Then there's another detail that raises eyebrows. The spending doesn't match the income. Watts isn't using most of the money. It's not being spent at a normal rate. Instead, it's accumulating, sitting untouched. So ask yourself, why would anyone funnel large sums of money to a man who will never leave prison? What's the incentive? Unless the money isn't really about commissary at all. Unless it's payment. Payment for silence. Think about it. If you wanted to ensure someone never talked, never revisited details, never contradicted an official narrative, you wouldn't need threats. You just need comfort, stability, protection, a clear message. Stay quiet, and you'll be taken care of. And here's the part that should give you pause. The money hasn't stopped. 7 years after the case was officially closed, someone is still making sure Chris Watts is financially secure behind bars. So what are they paying for? To answer that, you need to understand something else, because the money is only one piece of the puzzle. You need to look at the protection, not normal prison security, real protection. Chris Watts isn't treated like an ordinary inmate serving multiple life sentences. He's housed in a segregated unit with extremely limited contact. That alone isn't unusual given the nature of his crimes. But what is unusual is what happens to other inmates who get too close. Multiple reports suggest that prisoners housed near Watts have been abruptly transferred, not for rule violations, not for misconduct, but simply for proximity. In 2023, a former inmate spoke anonymously to a journalist. According to him, guards made one thing very clear: stay away from Watts. Don't talk to him. Don't interact with him. Don't even acknowledge him. Cross that line and you're moved. That level of control raises a serious question. Why would prison officials care so much about casual inmate conversation? Unless Chris Watts knows something that isn't supposed to circulate, something that isn't supposed to spread, even behind bars. There's more. His visitor access is unusually restricted, more than standard policy would require. Family members face additional approval hurdles. Some visitors have reportedly been denied without explanation. Compare that to other high-profile inmates. Even those serving life sentences typically have predictable visitation rules. Family visits, occasional approved researchers, sometimes even journalists. But with Watts, there's an invisible barrier, a gatekeeper deciding who gets access and who doesn't. That's not routine administration. That's active containment. So who's protecting him and why? To understand that, we need to look at how this case was handled from the very beginning, starting with the district attorney's office. because their approach was unusually fast. From arrest to guilty plea in a matter of weeks. No trial, no jury, no public examination of evidence. Now, you might say a confession makes a trial unnecessary. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But trials aren't just about determining guilt. They're about transparency. They're about placing every piece of evidence on the record, questioning witnesses, testing timelines, challenging assumptions. None of that happened here. The plea deal closed the door before the public ever saw the full picture. And since then, the district attorney's office has remained notably quiet, reluctant to revisit the case, unwilling to engage beyond the official narrative. And that leads us back to the central question. Why was this case sealed so quickly? And who benefits from keeping it that way? Another red flag appears when you look at access to public records. Independent journalists and researchers have filed dozens of Freedom of Information Act requests over the years. These are lawful requests, tools designed specifically so the public can examine how investigations are conducted. In most closed cases, especially after conviction, the majority of records are eventually released. But not here. Many of the requests tied to the Chris Watts case have either been denied outright or returned with heavy redactions. Page after page, entire sections blacked out. So the question becomes, what is being protected? What information years after conviction is still considered too sensitive for public review? In comparable cases, even those involving disturbing details, records are typically released once legal proceedings are complete. There's no clear legal obligation to keep evidence hidden when the accused has confessed, been convicted, and sentenced. Yet in this case, there's a wall, a barrier that researchers, journalists, and the public have been running into for years. Online, the questions haven't stopped. Reddit threads, YouTube investigations, social media discussions viewed millions of times, and still no answers. The district attorney's office has remained largely silent. Now consider the timeline. Cases of this magnitude usually take months, sometimes years. Multiple investigative teams, extensive forensic work, long interview processes. This one was resolved in weeks. Does that seem thorough, or does it feel rushed? As if closing the case quickly mattered more than fully examining every angle. Which brings us to Nicole Kessinger. Before we go any further, this needs to be said clearly. Nicole Kessinger has not been charged with any crime. There is no claim here of her guilt, but her role in this story raises questions that have never been fully addressed. It is an established fact that she was involved in a relationship with Chris Watts. After the murders, she cooperated with investigators. She gave statements. She turned over phone data, but not all of it, because when analysts reviewed her records, they noticed something unusual. Significant gaps. Periods where location data was missing. Times when her phone appeared inactive. Those gaps happened to overlap with key moments in the case timeline. Now, that doesn't automatically mean wrongdoing. Phones malfunction. Data can be lost. But in an investigation this serious, unexplained gaps should be examined thoroughly. Were they? There's more. Court documents show that Nicole made certain online searches that raised eyebrows. Searches related to Sean and Watts before she claimed to fully know who she was. Searches connected to the case before it had fully entered public awareness. Again, on their own, searches prove nothing. But combined with timeline inconsistencies, they raise legitimate questions. Then there's Jim Gutowski, a man Nicole was in contact with during this period. His exact role and relationship with her were never clearly explained to the public. He was not called as a witness, not publicly questioned. Why? Another detail often overlooked. Nicole's father has documented connections to law enforcement out of respect for privacy. Those details won't be named here, But online researchers have long suggested those connections may help explain aspects of how her interviews were handled. During police questioning, her father was present. She had every legal right to that. But in major investigations, witnesses with potentially critical information are often interviewed separately to avoid influence, especially early on. That didn't happen here. And then, after the case closed, Nicole Kessinger vanished from public view. She changed her name. She moved. She started over. Some believe she entered a form of witness protection. Others believe she simply chose privacy. But here's where it gets stranger. In 2023, an attempt was made to subpoena her, to require sworn testimony. Within 48 hours, the request was denied. That speed is unusual. Legal motions typically take weeks to review, sometimes longer. But this one was shut down almost immediately. So the question remains, why is Nicole Kessinger legally unreachable? What is she being protected from? Or what information is being protected through her silence? And this brings us back to the money. We know Chris Watts continues to receive regular deposits into his prison account. Not small amounts, significant ones. Speculation has ranged from secret book deals to media rights, but there are no public records supporting that. Others suggest donations from supporters. But Watts doesn't have an advocacy community. No organized fan base. No campaigns. He is almost universally condemned. So who is sending the money? And why does the spending pattern remain so unusual? Because as we follow the financial trail, it doesn't just raise questions about Chris Watts. It raises questions about everyone connected to keeping this case exactly where it is. Closed, silent, and unexplored. Most inmates spend what little money they have almost immediately. They buy basic necessities, make phone calls, pick up items from commissary. Whatever comes in usually goes right back out. But that's not what we see here. Chris Watts is receiving far more money than he's spending. The balance keeps growing. The funds just sit there untouched. So why? Is it because he doesn't need to spend it? Because his needs are being met in other ways? Or is the money there for an entirely different purpose? Let me be clear before I go further. What follows is theory, not accusation. It's speculation based on observable patterns. What if the money isn't meant to be used? What if it's a message, a reminder that he's being looked after? That cooperation has benefits. That silence is rewarded. That's how leverage works, not through threats, but through comfort. You make sure someone knows they're protected, supported, and provided for, as long as they don't start talking to the wrong people. If that's the case, then the real question becomes this. What is Chris Watts not saying? What information would be worth thousands of dollars a year to keep buried? And if that money ever stopped, if the protection disappeared, would he start talking? Because that possibility alone would explain why the deposits continue. Now let's shift to the evidence, specifically the evidence that should exist, but somehow doesn't. The Watts family lived in Frederick, Colorado, a quiet suburban neighborhood, houses close together, families everywhere. And by 2018, most homes and neighborhoods like that had security cameras, doorbell cameras, home surveillance systems, continuous recording setups. So when something catastrophic happened on August 13th, 2018, logic tells us there should be footage. Lots of it. Multiple angles. Clear timelines. Vehicles arriving and leaving. But what did the public actually see? One camera, one neighbor's footage. That's it. You might assume the rest simply didn't exist. Cameras malfunction. Angles miss things. Except residents in the neighborhood later stated their systems were working. Some reportedly contacted police to offer footage. So where is it? The Watts home itself was equipped with a Vivint system, designed to continuously monitor activity. That footage alone should have been extensive, yet it was never publicly released, never fully presented as evidence. It simply vanished from public view. Online researchers have spent years attempting to reconstruct the timeline using available data: traffic cameras, phone records, witness statements. What they found were gaps, significant gaps, periods of time that the official narrative doesn't fully account for. The official story maintains that Chris Watts acted alone, that everything unfolded at the house, and that he then drove directly to the oil site. But what if there's more? What if the missing footage shows activity that doesn't align with that version of events? At least 3 nearby homes reportedly had cameras. We've seen footage from one. Why not the others? Now let's talk about Chris Watts' workplace. At the time, he worked for Anadarko Petroleum, now Occidental Petroleum after merger. Oil and gas sites are among the most heavily monitored workplaces in the country for safety, for liability, for compliance. Vehicles are GPS tracked. Entry and exit logs are recorded. Surveillance is standard, which means there should be detailed records of Chris Watts' movements on August 13th, 2018. When he arrived, where he went, how long he stayed. That data should exist. Industry experts confirm that it has to. But certain GPS records were never included in the publicly available case file. Some site surveillance footage was never analyzed publicly, or at least never shared. Why? Even more puzzling, several coworkers who interacted with Chris that day were never thoroughly interviewed. Some weren't interviewed at all. These are people who could have noticed something unusual, a comment, a behavior, a detail. Why weren't they brought forward? Then there's the company's response. Anadarko settled with the victim's family quickly. The payout reportedly reached into the millions. After that, the company went silent. No public discussion. No detailed explanations. Every inquiry met with privacy claims and closed-door responses. Now, companies don't issue multi-million-dollar settlements casually. They do it to reduce risk, to avoid exposure, to prevent deeper scrutiny. So the question becomes, what risk were they mitigating? If the events had no connection to the workplace, if everything happened exactly as the official story says, there would be no corporate liability. So why the urgency? Why the settlement? Why the silence? Unless something tied to that day, that site, or that system wasn't meant to be examined too closely. And finally, there's digital evidence. In the modern world, we leave trails everywhere. Texts, calls, location data, search histories, social media activity. In a case of this magnitude, digital forensics should be exhaustive. But when you examine what was released publicly, inconsistencies appear. Phone records, both Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger's, contain gaps. Messages referenced in interviews were never shown. Entire conversations appear to be missing. Social media timelines don't always align with the official sequence of events. Posts were deleted. Searches contradict stated timelines. Now, technology isn't flawless. Data can be lost. But in a case this serious, missing data demands explanation. Modern forensic tools can recover deleted information, even after attempts to erase it. Phone servers, cloud storage, all leave traces. So when critical digital evidence simply isn't there, the question isn't can it be recovered? It's why wasn't it? And that brings us back to the central issue. This isn't about one missing file, or one unexplained transfer, or one unanswered question. It's about a pattern of protection, a pattern of silence, a pattern of things closing just before they're fully examined. And the longer this case remains sealed, the louder those unanswered questions become.